The thunderous roar of gunfire shattered the stillness of the Montana night, sending Vivian Forrester diving beneath her worn oak desk as bullets splintered the windows of her one-room schoolhouse. It was 1878, and the border town of Wytrock had become a lawless place since the silver boom brought all manner of desperate souls to its dusty streets. When the shooting finally stopped, Vivian cautiously raised her head. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she peered through the broken window. 3 riders disappeared into the darkness, their whoops of drunken laughter fading with distance. Another Friday night in Wytrock. At 24, Vivian had come west from Boston 2 years earlier, full of idealistic notions about bringing education to frontier children. Now, as she swept up shattered glass by lantern light, those ideals seemed as fragile as the windows themselves. "Miss Forrester." A deep voice called from the doorway. Vivian spun around, clutching the broom handle like a weapon. A tall man stood silhouetted against the moonlight, his broad shoulders filling the doorframe. "I saw the commotion," the man said, stepping inside and removing his hat. "Those were the Dixon boys. Been causing trouble since sundown." In the lantern light, Vivian recognized Blake Weston, a cattle rancher whose 2 children attended her school. His wife had died in childbirth 3 years earlier, leaving him to raise 7-year-old Emma and 5-year-old James alone. Unlike many of the rough men in Wytrock, Blake always appeared clean-shaven for Sunday church and parent meetings, though his weathered face and calloused hands spoke of hard work under the relentless Montana sun. "I'm fine, Mr. Weston," Vivian said, lowering the broom. "Just some broken glass." Blake surveyed the damage with a frown. "You shouldn't be out here alone, Miss Forrester. Not at night, not anymore." He gestured to the darkness beyond the windows. "Town's changing, not for the better." Vivian sighed, brushing glass fragments into a dustpan. "I had lesson plans to prepare for Monday." She straightened her spine, meeting his gaze directly. "I won't be intimidated into abandoning my responsibilities." A ghost of a smile touched Blake's lips. "Stubborn as a mountain goat, aren't you?" He picked up a wooden plank that had been blown from the window frame. "Let me help you secure this place for the night, then I'll escort you home." For once, Vivian didn't argue. As they worked together, she found herself watching him from the corner of her eye. Blake Weston was a puzzle to her, a hardened frontiersman who somehow maintained a gentle touch with his children. Emma and James always arrived at school clean and neatly dressed, their homework completed despite their father's demanding work. "How are Emma and James?" Vivian asked as they nailed the last board over the broken window. Something softened in Blake's expression. "Growing like weeds. Emma's reading that book you sent home, won't put it down even at dinner. And James," he chuckled, "that boy's determined to learn every bird call in the territory." "They're wonderful children," Vivian said sincerely. "They miss their mother," Blake replied quietly, hammering with more force than necessary. "I do what I can, but—" The unfinished sentence hung between them, heavy with meaning. After they finished securing the schoolhouse, Blake insisted on walking Vivian to her small cabin at the edge of town. They traveled in companionable silence through the darkness, the distant piano music from the saloon punctuating the night. At her door, Vivian turned to thank him. In the moonlight, she noticed the fine lines around his eyes, the weariness etched into his features. "You look exhausted, Mr. Weston," he shrugged. "Been a long week, cattle drives coming up, lot to prepare." Impulsively, Vivian touched his arm. "Your children are fortunate to have you." Something flashed in his eyes, vulnerability, perhaps before he nodded curtly. "Good night, Miss Forrester." "Good night, Mr. Weston." As she watched him stride away into the darkness, Vivian felt a curious tightening in her chest. She quickly dismissed it. Blake Weston was a student's father, nothing more. And she had come west to teach, not to entangle herself in romantic notions. 3 days later, Vivian was startled by a knock at her classroom door just as she was dismissing the children for lunch. Emma Weston stood there, her small face drawn with worry. "Miss Forrester, Pa sent me to fetch you. It's James. He fell from the hayloft this morning. Pa says his arm looks wrong." Vivian's stomach clenched. "Let me get my things." She grabbed her medical kit, a necessity for a frontier teacher, and followed Emma out to where Blake waited on horseback, James cradled carefully in his arms. The boy's face was pale, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Doc Crawford's gone to deliver the Hanson baby," Blake explained tersely. "Won't be back until tomorrow." Vivian nodded, understanding immediately. She was the closest thing to a medical professional available. "Bring him to my cabin. I have better light there." 20 minutes later, James lay on Vivian's kitchen table while she gently examined his arm. The boy whimpered, trying to be brave. "It's broken," she confirmed, meeting Blake's worried gaze. "But it's a clean break. I can set it." Blake knelt beside his son, stroking his hair. "Miss Forrester's going to fix you up, James. She's smart as they come." "Will it hurt?" James whispered. Vivian couldn't lie to him. "Yes, for a moment, but you're strong, just like your father." Blake's eyes met hers over his son's head, gratitude mingling with something deeper that made her heart flutter strangely. "Emma," Blake turned to his daughter, who hovered anxiously nearby. "Go fill that bucket from the pump." Once the girl was outside, Vivian nodded to Blake. "Hold him steady." Blake enveloped his son in a firm embrace while Vivian took hold of the arm. With one swift, practiced movement, she pulled and rotated the bone back into place. James let out a piercing scream that quickly dissolved into sobs. "The worst is over," Vivian soothed, efficiently splinting and wrapping the arm. "You were so brave, James." The boy hiccuped, his tears subsiding as she secured the bandages. Blake continued to murmur reassurances, his large hand gently rubbing his son's back. When Emma returned with the water, Vivian mixed a mild sedative powder into a cup. "This will help with the pain and let him sleep." After James drifted off, Blake carried him to Vivian's bedroom and laid him gently on her bed. Standing in the doorway, Vivian was struck by the tenderness with which the rugged rancher tucked the blankets around his son, brushing the hair from his forehead with calloused fingers. "Where did you learn to set bones?" Blake asked when he joined her in the kitchen. "My father was a doctor in Boston," she explained, washing blood from her hands. "I assisted him often. He believed women should understand medicine even if they couldn't practice professionally." Blake nodded slowly. "Sounds like a forward-thinking man." "He was." Sadness tinged her voice. "He died 2 years ago. It's partly why I came west. Too many memories." Understanding flickered in Blake's eyes. "Loss has a way of pushing us toward new horizons." They settled at Vivian's small table, drinking coffee as Emma curled up on a chair beside the stove with one of Vivian's books. The domestic scene felt strangely natural, as if they'd shared countless such moments. "James should rest here tonight," Vivian said. "Moving him will only cause more pain." Blake frowned. "I can't impose on you like that. It's not an imposition. I'm happy to help." Their eyes locked across the table and something unspoken passed between them. Blake looked away first. "I need to finish some work at the ranch," he said. "Emma can stay with you and James if that's agreeable. I'll return before nightfall." After Blake left, Vivian taught Emma how to make poultices for her brother's arm. The girl proved to be a quick study, her small hands mimicking Vivian's movements with surprising dexterity. "Pa says you're the smartest person in White Rock," Emma commented as they worked. Vivian felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Your father is very kind." "He doesn't say nice things unless he means them," Emma continued matter-of-factly. That's what Ma taught him, he says. Vivian smiled gently. Do you remember your mother, Emma? The girl nodded slowly. Some. I remember she smelled like lavender and sang at night. Her face grew serious. Pa sleeps on the floor between our beds every night. He thinks we don't know, but we do. He's afraid something will happen to us too. The revelation squeezed Vivian's heart. The image of Blake Weston, this strong, capable man, sleeping on a hard floor to keep his children safe, stirred something profound within her. True to his word, Blake returned at dusk with supplies from the ranch. James had awakened and, though in pain, brightened considerably when his father appeared. Blake had brought the children's nightclothes and a small wooden horse he'd apparently carved during the day for James. As night fell, they shared a simple meal Vivian prepared. The small cabin felt warmer somehow, filled with the presence of these three people who had unexpectedly become important to her. When it was time for bed, Blake insisted that Vivian take her bedroom with Emma, while he would stay with James on pallets in the main room. Vivian protested, but Blake was adamant. You've already given up enough for us today, he said firmly. Later that night, Vivian woke to the sound of James crying softly. She slipped from bed, careful not to disturb Emma, and padded barefoot into the main room. In the dim glow of the banked fire, she saw Blake cradling his son, rocking gently back and forth as he hummed a low melody. The scene was so intimate, so tender, that Vivian felt like an intruder. She started to retreat, but a floorboard creaked beneath her foot. Blake looked up, his eyes finding hers in the darkness. His arms paining him, Blake whispered. Vivian nodded, moving to prepare another dose of the sedative powder. As she worked, she could feel Blake watching her, his gaze a tangible weight against her skin. After James took the medicine and drifted back to sleep, Blake remained sitting on the edge of the pallet, shoulders slumped with exhaustion. When was the last time you had a full night's rest, Mr. Weston? Vivian asked softly. He shrugged. Sleep's a luxury for men with less responsibility. Acting on instinct, Vivian touched his shoulder. Lie down, I'll watch over James. Blake shook his head. I can't ask that of you. You didn't ask, I offered. Gently, she pushed him toward the second pallet. Rest, Blake, just for a little while. It was the first time she'd used his given name. The intimacy of it hung between them, changing something fundamental in their relationship. After a moment's hesitation, Blake stretched out on the pallet. Vivian settled into the rocking chair beside James, prepared to keep vigil through the night. Thank you, Blake murmured, his voice already heavy with approaching sleep. For everything. Sleep well, she whispered. Within minutes, his breathing deepened into the rhythm of slumber. In the firelight, with his guard down, he looked younger, the worry lines smoothed from his face. Vivian found herself studying him, the strong line of his jaw, the dark lashes against his cheeks, the slight curl of his hair at the nape of his neck. Something was happening to her heart, something both frightening and exhilarating. She had come west to escape pain and find purpose. She hadn't expected to find Blake Weston. The next morning, Vivian woke with a start, still in the rocking chair. Blake was already up, stoking the fire and putting coffee on to boil. He moved quietly, careful not to wake the children. You should have woken me, Vivian said, stretching stiff muscles. Blake glanced over with a small smile. You looked peaceful, seemed ashamed to disturb you. There was an ease between them now, as if the night had forged some unspoken bond. They shared coffee in companionable silence as dawn light filtered through the windows. Dr. Crawford arrived mid-morning to check James's arm, pronouncing Vivian's treatment excellent. Couldn't have done better myself, he declared, patting James's good shoulder. You're a lucky young man to have such a capable teacher. Blake insisted on paying Vivian for her help, which she firmly refused. It was the neighborly thing to do, she said, Before they left, Blake lingered on her porch while the children waited in the wagon. "I'm in your debt, Miss Forrester." "Vivian," she corrected softly. "After last night, I think we can dispense with formalities." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise followed by warmth. "Vivian, then." He hesitated, then added, "Perhaps you join us for Sunday dinner after church. The children would be pleased." "I would like that very much," she replied, her pulse quickening at the invitation. As she watched them drive away, Vivian acknowledged the truth she'd been avoiding. Her feelings for Blake Weston had grown beyond the boundaries of a teacher's concern for a student's parent. Sunday dinner became a weekly tradition over the next few months. Vivian would ride out to the Weston ranch after church, where Blake would have a simple but hearty meal prepared. He proved to be a surprisingly competent cook, explaining that he'd had to learn quickly after his wife's death. "Caroline always said a man should know his way around a kitchen," he told Vivian one afternoon as they washed dishes together. "Said it was as important as knowing how to rope a steer." Vivian smiled. "She sounds like she was a remarkable woman." She was. A shadow crossed Blake's face. "The children are all I have left of her." "Is that why you sleep between their beds?" The question slipped out before Vivian could stop it. Blake froze, water dripping from his hands. "Emma told you." Vivian nodded, suddenly fearful she'd overstepped. "She mentioned it the day James broke his arm." Blake dried his hands slowly, his back to her. "After Caroline died, James had nightmares, terrible ones. He'd wake up screaming for his mother. Emma too, though she tried to hide it." He turned to face her. "One night I just laid a blanket on the floor between their beds. They both slept through till morning for the first time in weeks." He shrugged, embarrassed. "Guess it became a habit." Vivian's heart ached for him. "You're a good father, Blake." His eyes met hers, vulnerability plain on his face. "I'm doing my best. Sometimes I wonder if it's enough." Without thinking, Vivian reached out and took his hand. "It's more than enough." For a long moment, they stood connected by that simple touch, something powerful and unspoken building between them. Blake's fingers tightened around hers, warm and strong. The moment was broken by Emma calling from outside, eager to show Vivian a nest of rabbits she'd discovered. As spring turned to summer, Vivian found herself spending more time at the Weston ranch. She helped Emma tend a small vegetable garden and taught James to identify constellations in the night sky. Blake would watch them with a quiet smile, occasionally joining in their activities, but often content to observe. One evening in late July, after the children had gone to bed, Blake and Vivian sat on the porch swing, watching fireflies dance in the gathering darkness. The air was heavy with the scent of pine and summer grass. "You've brought life back to this place," Blake said softly. "Before you started coming around, it was just existing, getting through each day." Vivian's heart quickened. "Your children have become very dear to me." Blake turned to look at her, his eyes serious in the fading light. "Just the children?" The question hung between them, charged with meaning. "No," Vivian admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not just the children." Blake's hand found hers on the swing between them, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers. "I never expected to feel this way again. After Caroline died, I thought that part of me was gone forever." Vivian squeezed his hand. "I understand if you're not ready, that's just it," Blake interrupted gently. "For the first time in 3 years, I feel ready to look forward instead of back." He hesitated. "But I come with responsibilities, 2 children who have already lost one mother." "I adore Emma and James," Vivian said honestly. "They're part of why I—" She faltered, unsure if she should speak the words forming in her heart. Blake reached up with his free hand, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Part of why you what, Vivian?" She gathered her courage. "Part of why I've fallen in love with you." The words seemed to hang in the air between them, irrevocable and true. For one terrible moment, Blake was silent, and Vivian feared she'd misread everything. Then he leaned forward, his hand gently cupping her cheek. "I've loved you since the night you stayed up watching over my son," he whispered. "Maybe even before that." When his lips met hers, Vivian felt as though something long broken inside her had finally healed. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with an intensity that left her breathless. Blake's arms encircled her, pulling her close against his chest. "I don't want to rush this," he murmured against her hair. "For the children's sake and for ours." Vivian nodded, understanding completely. "We have time." As summer waned, Vivian's presence at the Weston ranch became a constant. She would ride out after school, helping with chores and spending time with the children. On weekends, she often stayed overnight in the small guest room, her influence gradually transforming the bachelor household into a proper home again. The children flourished under her attention. Emma's reading advanced rapidly, while James's natural curiosity found encouragement in Vivian's patient explanations of the world around them. Blake watched the changes with a mixture of joy and lingering uncertainty. One night in early September, after the children were asleep, he found Vivian on the porch, gazing at the stars. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, settling beside her. Vivian smiled. "I was just thinking about how much has changed since James fell from that hayloft." Blake took her hand. "All for the better, I hope." "Mostly," she agreed. "Though there are still nights when I ride home to my cabin and wish I were staying here instead." Blake's expression grew serious. "I've been thinking about that." From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet pouch. Vivian's heart began to race as he emptied its contents into his palm, a simple gold band with a small pearl. "It was my mother's," Blake explained. "Caroline wore it until she couldn't anymore." Vivian's eyes filled with tears as Blake slid from the bench to one knee before her. "Vivian Forrester, you've brought light back into our lives. The children adore you and I." His voice faltered briefly. "I love you more than I thought possible. Will you marry me? Become a mother to Emma and James and my wife for whatever years were granted." "Yes," Vivian whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "With all my heart, yes." The ring slipped onto her finger as though it had been made for her. Blake pulled her into his arms, his kiss sealing the promise between them. They agreed to marry before the first snowfall. The news spread quickly through Whiterock, met mostly with approval. A few raised eyebrows at the schoolteacher marrying a rancher, but most recognized the match as fitting. Emma and James were ecstatic, particularly when Blake explained that Vivian would be coming to live with them permanently. "Will you be our mother now?" James asked Vivian one evening as she tucked him into bed. The question caught her off guard. She glanced at Blake, who stood watching from the doorway. "I would be honored to be your mother," Vivian answered carefully. "But I know you had a wonderful mother before me. I don't want to replace her in your hearts." "Pa says the heart can grow to love more people," Emma said from her bed across the room. "Like a garden that always has room for more flowers." Blake's eyes met Vivian's over the children's heads, and the love she saw there nearly overwhelmed her. "Your father is a very wise man," she managed to say. That night, after the children were asleep, Blake didn't take his customary place on the floor between their beds. Instead, he found Vivian in the kitchen finishing the dinner dishes. "They're changing," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "Healing because of you." Vivian dried her hands on a towel. "They're remarkable children, Blake, strong like their father." He crossed to her, taking her in his arms. "I haven't slept a full night in years," he confessed, "always listening for nightmares, for trouble." Vivian rested her head against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "Perhaps it's time you let someone watch over you for a change." Blake's arms tightened around her. "Soon," he promised. "After we're married." Their wedding day dawned crisp and clear in mid-October. The entire town of White Rock turned out for the ceremony in the small church, followed by a celebration at the schoolhouse. Emma served as Vivian's maid of honor, proudly carrying a bouquet of late-blooming wildflowers, while James stood solemnly beside his father, the rings secured in his pocket. As Vivian spoke her vows, she looked into Blake's eyes and saw their future unfolding years of love and laughter, of shared burdens and simple joys. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, the cheers of the townsfolk were nearly drowned out by Emma's excited squeal. That evening, after the celebration ended and they returned to the ranch now, her home, Vivian watched as Blake tucked the children into bed. There was a new lightness to him, as though a long-carried burden had finally been set down. "Sleep well," he told the children, kissing each on the forehead. "Vivian and I are just down the hall if you need anything." As he straightened, Emma caught his hand. "You don't have to sleep on our floor anymore, Pa. We'll be all right now." Blake's eyes glistened in the lamplight. "Are you sure, sweetheart?" Emma nodded solemnly. "We have a mother again. And you have Vivian." In their own bedroom, the master bedroom Blake had not used since Caroline's death, Vivian helped her new husband unbutton his shirt, her fingers trembling slightly with anticipation. Blake caught her hands, bringing them to his lips. "I never thought I'd know this happiness again," he whispered. "Nor I," Vivian admitted. "When I came west, I was running from pain. I never expected to find a home, a family." Blake drew her into his arms. "You are my heart, Vivian Weston." Later, as they lay entwined beneath the quilts, Vivian listened to Blake's breathing deepen into sleep. For the first time in 3 years, he slept deeply, peacefully, without one ear alert for children's cries. Vivian gently stroked his hair, watching over him as he'd watched over Emma and James for so long. "Sleep well, my love," she whispered. "I'm here now." Winter came early that year, blanketing the ranch in snow by November. The household settled into new rhythms, mornings around the breakfast table, Vivian teaching the children their lessons at home when weather prevented travel to the schoolhouse. Evenings spent reading by the fire or singing songs Vivian remembered from her childhood. Blake marveled at the transformation of his home. Curtains appeared at windows, colorful quilts brightened beds, shelves filled with books. But more importantly, laughter echoed through rooms that had been too quiet for too long. One night in December, a blizzard howled outside, rattling the windows with its fury. After dinner, as Blake stoked the fire, a loud thump at the door startled them all. "Wolves?" James asked fearfully. Blake reached for his rifle, but before he could investigate, the door burst open. A man stumbled in, half frozen and covered in snow. "Mitchell." Blake lowered his weapon, recognizing one of his ranch hands. "What in God's name?" "Sorry to bust in, boss," Mitchell gasped, his lips blue with cold. "Cattle broke through the south fence. Storm spooked him." "They're scattered across the lower pasture, headed for the ravine." Blake's face hardened. "How many men do we have out there?" "Just Peterson and me. Others couldn't make it through from town." Blake turned to Vivian. "I have to go. Those cattle are our livelihood." Fear clutched at Vivian's heart. The storm outside was deadly. She could hear its vicious howl, but she understood what was at stake. "Be careful," she said, helping him into his heavy coat. "Come back to us." Blake kissed her fiercely, then knelt to reassure the children. "I'll be back before you know it. Mind Vivian while I'm gone." After he left with Mitchell, Vivian kept the children occupied with games and stories, hiding her own anxiety behind a calm facade. Hours passed with no sign of Blake's return. The children eventually fell asleep on the sofa, exhausted from worry. Midnight came and went. Vivian paced the floor, watching the storm through frost-covered windows. The wind's howl had diminished somewhat, but snow still fell heavily. She imagined Blake out there in the darkness, fighting to save their livelihood, possibly injured or lost. Just after 2 in the morning, when Vivian had nearly convinced herself to wake the children and move them to the root cellar for safety, the door finally opened. Blake stumbled in, his clothes frozen stiff, his face raw from the wind. Vivian flew to him, helping him remove his ice-encrusted coat. "Thank God," she breathed, leading him to the fire. "I was so afraid." "Lost 8 head," Blake said through chattering teeth, "but saved most of the herd. Got them into the north shelter." His exhaustion was evident in every line of his body. As Vivian helped him change into dry clothes and wrapped him in warm blankets before the fire, she noticed the children had awakened. "Pa!" Emma cried, rushing to him. James followed, both children clambering onto the sofa beside their father. "We were scared," James admitted, pressing against Blake's side. "I told you I'd come back," Blake said, wrapping an arm around each child. "Always will." Within minutes, both children had fallen asleep again, nestled against their father. Blake's own eyes grew heavy, the ordeal of the night catching up with him. "Let me take them to bed," Vivian offered. Blake shook his head. "Let them stay. I need them close tonight." Understanding completely, Vivian brought more blankets, tucking them around the trio. Then, instead of retiring to their bedroom alone, she settled into the armchair beside the sofa, keeping vigil as Blake and the children slept. In the soft glow of the fire, watching over her family, Vivian felt a profound sense of rightness. This was what she had been seeking without knowing it, not just love, but belonging. A place where she was needed, where her strength complemented Blake's, where together they created something greater than either could alone. As winter gave way to spring, life at the Weston Ranch fell into pleasant rhythms. Vivian continued teaching at the schoolhouse, riding home each afternoon to find Blake and the children waiting for her. Evenings were filled with shared meals, lessons, and increasingly, music. Vivian had brought her mother's piano from Boston, and the sound of it filled the house as she taught Emma to play. One evening in April, as Vivian played while Blake whittled by the fire, Emma looked up from her book with a thoughtful expression. "Vivian," she said carefully, "would you mind very much if I called you Mother?" The question caught Vivian mid-note, her fingers faltering on the keys. She turned on the piano bench to face the girl, emotion tightening her throat. "I would be honored, Emma," she said softly. "If you're certain that's what you want." Emma nodded decisively. "I am. James wants to also, but he was afraid to ask." From his place by the fire, James looked up with wide eyes. "I wasn't afraid," he protested, though his reddening ears suggested otherwise. "Well," Vivian said, opening her arms, "I would love to be called Mother by both of you if that's truly what you wish." The children rushed to embrace her, nearly knocking her from the piano bench. Over their heads, Vivian's eyes met Blake's. The naked emotion on his face, gratitude, love, a touch of bittersweet memory made her heart swell. That night, after the children were asleep, Blake found Vivian in their bedroom, brushing her hair before the mirror. "You've given them something I couldn't," he said, coming to stand behind her. "A mother's touch, a mother's heart." Vivian set down her brush and turned to face him. "They've given me just as much, a family, a purpose beyond my teaching." Blake took her hands, his expression growing serious. "There's something I need to show you." He led her down the hall to the children's room, quietly opening the door. In the soft glow of the night lamp, they could see Emma and James sleeping peacefully in their beds. Between them, the space where Blake had once kept his vigil was empty. "I haven't slept there since our wedding night," Blake whispered. "They don't need me to anymore. They have you now, too." Vivian squeezed his hand. "They'll always need you, Blake, as do I." He pulled her close, resting his chin atop her head. "We've come full circle, haven't we? I spent so many nights watching over them. Now you watch over all of us." Later, as they lay in their own bed, Blake's arm draped protectively across her waist, Vivian reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a lonely schoolteacher facing broken windows and frontier lawlessness to a wife and mother embraced by love from all sides. "Blake," she whispered, unsure if he was still awake. "I have something to tell you." He stirred beside her. "What is it?" Vivian took his hand and placed it gently over her stomach. "We're going to have a baby." For a moment, Blake was completely still. Then he propped himself up on one elbow, his face barely visible in the darkness. "Are you certain?" Dr. Crawford confirmed it yesterday. Vivian bit her lip nervously. "Are you pleased?" Blake's answer was to gather her in his arms, holding her as though she were made of the most precious glass. "Please doesn't begin to describe it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Oh, Vivian, another child, our child." The news of Vivian's pregnancy brought joy to the entire household. Emma and James were excited at the prospect of a new sibling, peppering Vivian with questions about the baby and when it would arrive. "Not until November," she explained patiently. "Babies need time to grow strong before they're ready to join the world." As Vivian's body changed with the growing life inside her, Blake became increasingly protective. He insisted on hiring a young woman from town to help with household chores and accompany Vivian to and from the schoolhouse each day. "I'm perfectly capable of riding to school alone," Vivian protested one morning in August, as the summer heat pressed down on the land. "I know you are," Blake replied, helping her onto her gentle mare despite her objections. "Humor me, Vivian. I've already lost one wife to childbirth. I couldn't bear to lose you too." The naked fear in his eyes silenced her protests. Caroline had died, bringing James into the world, a specter that haunted Blake still. Vivian reached down to touch his cheek. "I'm strong and healthy," she reassured him. "And Dr. Crawford says everything is progressing perfectly." "Even so," Blake insisted, "promise me you'll be careful." Vivian smiled tenderly. "I promise." As harvest time approached, Blake worked from dawn until dusk, determined to have the ranch secure for winter before the baby arrived. Vivian worried he was pushing himself too hard, but understood his drive to provide for their expanding family. One evening in late September, she found him in the barn long after dark, repairing tack by lantern light, exhaustion evident in the slump of his shoulders. "Blake Weston," she said from the doorway, "it's nearly midnight." He looked up, startled. "I didn't realize it was so late." "Just wanted to finish this before tomorrow's ride." Vivian entered the barn, her hand resting on her swollen belly. "You need rest as much as I do. The baby will need a father with strength to spare, not one who's worked himself to illness." Blake set aside his work, rubbing a hand across his face. "You're right, as usual." He stood, wincing as stiff muscles protested. "See," Vivian chided gently. "Come to bed. The work will wait until morning." As they walked back to the house together, Blake's arm around her waist, Vivian leaned into his solid warmth. "The children miss you at bedtime." "They've gotten used to both of us tucking them in." Blake nodded, guilt flashing across his features. "I'll make it up to them. Tomorrow I'll take them fishing after school. They'd like that." In their bedroom, Vivian helped Blake remove his boots, clucking her tongue at the state of his socks. "You've worn holes in these again." Blake smiled tiredly. "Good thing I married a woman who can darn socks." "Good thing indeed." Vivian changed into her nightgown, the fabric draping over her rounded belly. As she brushed her hair, she caught Blake watching her in the mirror, his expression a mixture of wonder and tenderness. "What is it?" she asked. "Just thinking how beautiful you are," he replied. "Carrying our child, being a mother to Emma and James, making this house a home. Vivian set down her brush and came to sit beside him on the bed. "I never imagined such happiness was possible," she admitted. "When I came west, I thought teaching would be enough. I never expected all of this." Blake drew her into his arms, his hand coming to rest on her belly. As if in response, the baby kicked against his palm. "Strong," he murmured, "like its mother." They settled into bed, Vivian nestled against Blake's side, his arm protective around her shoulders. As she drifted toward sleep, she felt his lips press against her forehead. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" she murmured drowsily. "For tucking me in too." The weeks passed, and as November approached, Vivian reluctantly agreed to stop teaching until after the baby was born. The children were delighted to have her home full-time, eagerly helping prepare the nursery in the small room adjacent to the master bedroom. One cold morning, as the first snow dusted the ground, Vivian felt the initial pangs of labor. Blake, who had barely left her side for days, immediately sent Emma to fetch Dr. Crawford while he helped Vivian to their bed. "It's too early," Vivian said, fear edging her voice. "The baby wasn't due for another week." "Everything will be fine," Blake assured her, though his own face was taut with worry. "Dr. Crawford knows what he's doing." The labor progressed rapidly, too rapidly for the doctor to arrive in time. As Vivian's pains intensified, Blake sent James to heat water and gather clean linens. "Blake," Vivian gasped between contractions, clutching his hand. "The baby's coming. Now." For a moment, panic flashed across his face, memories of Caroline's difficult delivery clearly haunting him. Then his expression settled into determined calm. "I'm here," he said firmly. "I won't leave your side." With only Blake's steady hands to help her, Vivian brought their daughter into the world just as the clock struck noon. The baby's lusty cry filled the room, bringing tears to both parents' eyes. "She's perfect," Blake whispered, laying the swaddled infant in Vivian's arms, "just like her mother." Exhausted but radiant, Vivian gazed down at their daughter's tiny face. "Caroline," she said softly. "We'll call her Caroline." Blake's eyes filled with tears. "Are you sure?" Vivian nodded. "To honor the woman who gave you Emma and James, who helped make you the man I love." Blake pressed his forehead to hers, overwhelmed by emotion. "I don't deserve you, Vivian Weston." She smiled through her own tears. "Too bad. You're stuck with me now, Doctor." Crawford arrived shortly after, pronouncing both mother and baby healthy. Emma and James were allowed in to meet their new sister, their faces alight with wonder as they peered at the tiny bundle in Vivian's arms. "She's so small," James marveled. "But she'll grow," Emma said confidently. "Just like we did." That night, after the excitement had settled and the children were asleep, Vivian woke to find Blake's side of the bed empty. Concerned, she wrapped herself in a robe and went in search of him, careful not to disturb the baby sleeping in her cradle nearby. She found him in the children's room, sitting on the floor between their beds, his back against the wall, simply watching them sleep. In the dim light, she could see tear tracks on his cheeks. Silently, Vivian sank down beside him, taking his hand in hers. "I used to do this every night," Blake whispered, "watching them breathe, making sure they were safe. I know. After Caroline died, I was so afraid I'd lose them too, that I wouldn't be enough." He squeezed her hand. "Then you came into our lives." Vivian rested her head on his shoulder. "And now we have another daughter," Blake nodded. "A miracle, all of it." They sat together in peaceful silence, watching over the sleeping children. Finally, Vivian tugged gently at Blake's hand. "Come back to bed," she murmured. "Little Caroline will be hungry soon." Blake allowed himself to be led back to their bedroom, where their newborn daughter slept peacefully. As they settled back into bed, Vivian tucked the blankets around Blake's shoulders, pressing a kiss to his temple. "Sleep," she whispered. I'll watch over all of you tonight." With a sigh of contentment, Blake closed his eyes, secure in the knowledge that his family was complete and safe. Vivian stayed awake a while longer, one hand resting lightly on baby Caroline's cradle, the other entwined with her husband's. This was what it meant to be truly home, she realized. Not a place, but a feeling. The feeling of being exactly where you were meant to be, surrounded by those you were meant to love. Outside, snow began to fall more heavily, blanketing the ranch in pristine white. But inside the Weston home, warmth and love held the winter at bay. A family that had once been broken was now healed and whole, strengthened by the bonds they had forged together. And as Vivian drifted toward sleep, she knew that whatever challenges the future might bring, they would face them together, the schoolteacher who had found her true calling, the cowboy who no longer needed to sleep on the floor, and the children who had helped them all find their way home. 5 years later, on a bright spring morning, Vivian stood on the porch of the Weston ranch, watching as Blake taught 7-year-old Caroline to ride her new pony. Emma, now 12 and growing into a thoughtful young woman, sat on the porch steps reading, while 10-year-old James helped Blake with the training, proudly sharing his expertise with his younger sister. The ranch had prospered under their joint care. Blake's cattle operation had expanded, and Vivian still taught at the schoolhouse, though now with the assistance of a young teacher from back east whom she was mentoring. Their family had grown. 3-year-old Benjamin, named for Vivian's father, was currently napping inside after an exciting morning of helping his father with chores. As Vivian watched Blake lift Caroline from the pony and swing her around in celebration of her first successful solo ride, warmth flooded her heart. His hair was touched with silver at the temples now, but he moved with the same strength and grace that had first attracted her attention in the schoolhouse doorway all those years ago. When he looked up and caught her watching, his smile still capable of making her heart skip a beat spread across his face. With Caroline perched on his shoulders, he strode toward the porch, James trotting alongside. "Did you see, Mother?" Caroline called excitedly. "I rode Daisy all by myself." "I saw, sweetheart," Vivian replied. "You were magnificent." Blake set Caroline down on the porch and climbed the steps to stand beside Vivian. His arms slipped around her waist, a gesture as natural as breathing after years of marriage. "She's fearless, like her mother," he murmured, pressing a kiss to Vivian's temple. Vivian leaned into his embrace. "I seem to recall being quite fearful when we first met. Those Dixon boys shooting up my schoolhouse nearly sent me back to Boston." Blake chuckled. "Thank God they were poor shots." As the children chattered around them, Vivian reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from a frightened teacher and a grieving widower to partners in every sense, building a life rich with love and purpose. "What are you thinking?" Blake asked, noting her contemplative expression. Vivian smiled up at him. "I'm thinking about how fortunate we are, how complete." Blake's eyes, still as blue and direct as the day they met, held hers with understanding. "All because you had the courage to stay, to help a broken man raise his children." "You were never broken," Vivian corrected gently. "Just waiting to be whole again." Later that night, after all 4 children were tucked into their beds with stories and kisses, Vivian found Blake in their room, sitting on the edge of the bed removing his boots. The simple domesticity of the scene still had the power to move her. This strong man who had once kept lonely vigil between his children's beds, now secure in the family they had built together. "Benjamin asked for an extra story tonight," she said, sitting beside him. "That boy would stay awake until dawn if we let him." Blake smiled. "Wonder where he gets that from. Certainly not his mother, who reads until all hours." Vivian nudged him playfully. "At least I'm not the one who taught James to howl like a coyote." A valuable frontier skill, Blake defended with mock seriousness. They fell into comfortable silence as they prepared for bed. Through the open window came the night sounds of the ranch, distant lowing of cattle, the soft whicker of horses in the barn, the endless chorus of crickets. As they settled beneath the quilts, Blake's arm automatically encircled Vivian, drawing her close against his side. It was how they had slept for years now, finding in each other's embrace the peace and security they had both sought for so long. "I love you, Vivian Weston," Blake murmured into her hair. "More today than yesterday, less than tomorrow." Vivian pressed closer, her hand resting over his heart. "And I love you, always have, always will." As moonlight spilled through the window, painting silver patterns across their bed, Vivian reflected on the unexpected gift her life had become. She had come west seeking purpose and had found a home, a family, a love that had healed not just Blake and his children, but her own heart as well. And as sleep claimed them both, Vivian's last conscious thought was one of profound gratitude for broken windows and children's arms, for blizzards and babies, and most of all, for the man beside her who had learned to be watched over, even as he watched over others. The cowboy who no longer needed to sleep between his children's beds, because love had finally made them all secure.